Part 1. After Theories. Lecture 1. African American Theory. This lecture is prepared by Dr. Sai Joseph Arul Jairaj, former Head and Associate Professor of English, St. Joseph's College, Autonomous, Tiruchirappalli, 620002, Tamil Nadu, India. Introduction. The study of African American theory helps us understand how race, gender, class, and culture shape the lives of Black Americans. Unlike a single theory, this field is a collection of ideas that scholars, activists, and writers have built up over more than a century. The goal of this chapter is to explain the origins, central concepts, and important contributors of African American theory in language that is easy to follow. By the end of the article, readers should be able to recognize the main themes of the field and see how they are used in education, law, and media. When we read a story written by an African American author, we can look at it in many ways. One powerful way is through African American theory, a body of critical ideas that grew out of the Black experience in the United States. The theory asks questions such as, how does the legacy of slavery shape language and identity? What does double consciousness mean for a Black character? How do oral traditions, music, and signifying influence the text? By using these questions, readers can uncover deeper meanings that might be hidden in the plot or the characters. This chapter first outlines the most important concepts of African American theory, then shows how they are applied to several classic works of literature. Theory. Historical background. Early foundations. The first major work that can be called an African American theoretical text is W.E.B. Du Bois's The Souls of Black Folk, 1903. Du Bois introduced double consciousness, describing how Black people see themselves both as Americans and as a marginalized group, Du Bois 4. This early writing set the stage for later scholars to explore identity, oppression, and resistance. The Civil Rights Era. In the 1950s and 1960s, activists like Martin Luther King, Jr. and Rosa Parks fought for legal equality. At the same time, scholars such as C.R. Johnson and John Henrik Clarke began connecting the fight for civil rights with academic analysis of Black history and culture. Johnson, 23. The period produced a growing body of work that questioned mainstream narratives and highlighted the importance of Black agency. Black power and Black feminism. The late 1960s and 1970s witnessed the rise of the Black Power movement, emphasizing pride, self-determination, and political autonomy. Harper, 55. Parallel to this, Black women scholars started voicing concerns that sexism was often ignored by male-centered Black politics. Patricia Hill Collins and Bell Hooks pioneered Black feminist thought, which argued that race, gender, and class intersect to create unique forms of oppression. Collins 3, Hooks 12. Core concepts. Concept. Double consciousness. Definition. The feeling of looking at yourself through the eyes of a society that judges you as different. You live with two identities at once, your own self-view and the view forced on you by racism. Key proponent, W.E.B. Du Bois. Concept, intersectionality. Definition, the idea that different parts of a person's identity, like race, gender, class, and sexuality, work together to shape how they experience oppression or privilege. Key proponent, Kimberly Crenshaw. Concept, Black feminist thought. Definition: a perspective that centers black women's experiences, showing how sexism and racism combine to create unique struggles. Key proponents: Patricia Hill Collins, Bell Hooks. Concept: cultural critique. Definition: analyzing how art, music, literature, and everyday life express resistance, identity, and community for black people. Key proponents: Stuart Hall, Henry Louis Gates, Jr. Concept: Afrofuturism. Definition: a creative movement that imagines black futures through science fiction, technology, and speculative art, challenging the idea that black culture belongs only to the past. Key proponents: Mark Derry, Octavia Butler. These concepts are not isolated. Scholars often combine them to build richer explanations of black life in America. Major thinkers and their contributions. 1. W.E.B. Du Bois, The Souls of Black Folk, 1903. Introduced double consciousness, Du Bois 4. Emphasized the importance of education and political activism for black progress. 2. James Baldwin, Notes of a Native Son, 1955. Used personal essays to discuss how racism affects personal identity and family life, Baldwin 78. 3. Bell Hooks, Ain't I a Woman, 1981. Examined how sexism and racism work together to oppress black women, Hooks 25. Wrote in a conversational style to reach a wider audience, Hooks 41. 4. Patricia Hill Collins, Black Feminist Thought, 1990. Developed the concept of matrix of domination, showing how oppression is layered, Collins 1. 5. Kimberly Crenshaw, Mapping the Margins, Intersectionality, Identity Politics and Violence Against Women of Color, 1991. Coined intersectionality to explain why legal systems often ignore the experiences of black women, Crenshaw 124. 6. Angela Davis, Women, Race and Class, 1981. Connected the histories of slavery, labor, and feminist movement, Davis 67. 7. Stuart Hall, Cultural Studies and Its Theoretical Legacies, 1992. Analyzed how media and popular culture shape racial identities, Hall 55. 8. Octavia Butler, Kindred, 1979. Through science fiction storytelling, it illustrated how history and trauma affect black identity, Butler 143. These scholars collectively built the foundation of African American theory, blending history, sociology, literature, and law.
Practice. Applications in contemporary fields. Education. African American theory informs culturally responsive teaching. By applying concepts like double consciousness, teachers can recognize how black students may navigate conflicting identities in the classroom. Ladson, 17. Curriculum designers now include works by black authors and scholars to provide a more inclusive perspective. Banks, 29. Law. Legal scholars use intersectionality to critique how the justice system often fails black women and LGBTQ+ individuals. Crenshaw's framework helps courts understand that race and gender cannot be separated in cases of discrimination. Matsuda, 103. Media and popular culture. Films such as Black Panther and TV series like Insecure employ Afrofuturism and cultural critique to showcase black empowerment and nuanced storytelling.
Critics use African American theory to assess how these works challenge stereotypes and create new representations. Nama, 88. Public policy. Policymakers draw on Black feminist thought to design programs that address both racial and gender inequalities, such as targeted health initiatives for Black mothers. Collins, 45. How is African American theory practiced in literature? Key concepts of African American theory. Concept: double consciousness. Origin: W.E.B. Du Bois, The Souls of Black Folk, 1903. What it means for literature. A black person sees themselves through the eyes of a white society while also having a distinct black self-awareness. In literature, this creates inner conflict and a split perspective. Concept: signifying. Origin: Henry Louis Gates, Jr., The Signifying Monkey, 1988. What it means for literature. A playful rhetorical strategy that uses irony, parody, and indirect reference. It links modern black writing to African oral traditions. Concept: the black aesthetic. Origin: Addison Dale, The Black Aesthetic, 1971. What it means for literature. The idea is that black art should reflect the black experience, resist white standards, and celebrate African roots. Concept: intersectionality. Origin: Kimberly Crenshaw, Mapping the Margins, 1991. Adopted by Black feminist scholars. What it means for literature. The way race, gender, class, and sexuality intersect. In literature, it urges readers to notice how black women's experiences differ from black men's. Concept: oral tradition and vernacular. Origin: Bell Hooks, Talking Back, 1989. What it means for literature. The use of spoken language rhythms, call and response, and African American English as literary tools. These ideas are not isolated. Scholars often blend them when they analyze a text. Gates, Jr., 45. How do scholars use the theory? A. Historical contextualization. Critics place a work inside the era of Jim Crow, the Civil Rights Movement, or the Black Power era to explain its political urgency. Gale, 22. Close reading of language. By focusing on vernacular, repetition, and signifying, scholars reveal how African American writers create a distinct voice. Hooks, 108. Identity analysis. Using double consciousness, critics explore how characters negotiate between being American and being black. Du Bois, 73. Gender and power. Intersectionality leads to readings that highlight how black women negotiate both racism and sexism. Collins, 54. These approaches have become standard tools in African American literary studies. Gates, Jr., 67. Implementation in specific literary works. 1. Their Eyes Were Watching God, Zora Neale Hurston, 1937. Signifying and oral tradition. Hurston's narrator, Janie, tells her story in a rhythmic oral style voice that mirrors African American folk speech. Scholars note the call and response pattern as a signifying technique. Stauffer, 91. Double consciousness. Janie feels torn between the expectations of the white-dominated society and the black community's own norms, especially in her marriage to Joe Starks, who wants her to be a proper black lady in the town of Eatonville. Du Bois, 78. Native Son, Richard Wright, 1940. The Black Aesthetic. Wright writes a harsh, realistic portrait of Bigger Thomas, showing the effects of systemic racism. Critics argue this reflects the black aesthetic's demand for truth over romanticized images. Gale, 34. Intersection of race and class. Bigger's poverty intensifies his sense of double consciousness, making him both a victim of white oppression and a perpetrator of violence. Gates, Jr., 102. Invisible Man, Ralph Ellison, 1952. Double consciousness and signifying. The unnamed narrator constantly adjusts his identity to survive, echoing Du Bois's two souls idea. Ellison also uses signifying jokes and jazz motifs to critique white cultural appropriation. Lewis, 57. Oral tradition. The narrative's fragmented narrative, with its "I'm invisible" refrain, mimics spoken word storytelling, creating a voice that is both personal and communal. Hooks, 115. Beloved, Toni Morrison, 1987. Historical contextualization. Morrison sets the novel after the Civil War, confronting the trauma of slavery. By using ghostly symbolism, she reveals how the past haunts the present, a central concern of African American theory. Gates, Jr., 143. Intersectionality. The protagonist Sethi's experience intertwines race, gender, and motherhood. Feminist scholars point out how Sethi's re-memory of her infant's death demonstrates the compounded oppression of black women. Collins, 72. The Color Purple, Alice Walker, 1982. Intersectionality and Black Feminist Theory. Walker's letters between Celie and other black women expose how patriarchy and racism intersect. The novel's use of vernacular language aligns with the black aesthetic's celebration of African American speech. Hooks, 84. Signifying. The epistolary form lets characters signify each other's experiences through humor and wordplay, turning pain into empowerment. Stauffer, 108.
Discussion. Across these works, African American theory functions as a lens that reveals hidden layers of meaning. The theory does not replace a simple plot summary. Instead, it asks readers to look for voice. How does the author use language that reflects oral traditions or vernacular speech? Identity conflict. In what moments does a character show double consciousness? Power relations. How are race, gender, and class intertwined in the narrative? Cultural continuity. Are there references to African folklore, music, or signifying traditions? When readers apply these questions, they discover that African American literature is not just about the black experience in a generic sense. It is a dynamic conversation with history, culture, and artistic traditions that continues to evolve. Critiques and ongoing debates. While African American theory has enriched many disciplines, it also faces criticism. Some argue that the focus on race may overlook class or regional differences among black Americans. Floyd, 71. Others contend that the field sometimes speaks in academic jargon, making it inaccessible to the very communities it studies. Hooks, 63. Recent scholarship works to bridge these gaps by using community-based research methods and clear everyday language. Conclusion. African American theory is a living, evolving set of ideas that helps us see how race, gender, class, and culture intersect in the lives of black Americans. From Du Bois's early reflections on double consciousness to Crenshaw's modern concept of intersectionality, the field offers tools for understanding oppression and for imagining new possibilities. By applying these ideas in education, law, media, and policy, scholars and activists continue to push toward a more equitable society. Readers reading this chapter should now be able to A. Identify the main historical moments that shaped African American theory, B. Define its core concepts in plain language, C. Recognize the contributions of key thinkers, D. See how the theory is used in real-world contexts. Continued study and dialogue will ensure that African American theory remains relevant for future generations seeking justice and representation. African American theory provides a set of tools, double consciousness, signifying the Black aesthetic, intersectionality, and attention to oral traditions that help readers understand how Black writers shape their stories. By applying the theory to novels such as Their Eyes Were Watching God, Native Son, Invisible Man, Beloved, and The Color Purple, we see that the theory is not abstract, it is embedded in the very words, rhythms, and characters of the literature. For readers, learning this theory means learning to listen to the multiple voices within a text and to appreciate how those voices speak to both history and the ongoing struggle for identity and justice. Thank you.